1965 to commemorate the life and work of Sir Edward Appleton. And you have a lot of details in your pack about Appleton and about what he did. He was a physicist and Nobel laureate winner, and mostly renowned for his research into radio propagation in the upper atmosphere, and indeed many of you will know of the Appleton layer, which is used for a range of radio propagation conditions. The very first Appleton lecture was given by John Ratcliffe, a former institution president. It covered the life of Sir Edward Appleton, and it's been reproduced in your pack tonight. Read that at your leisure. In more recent years, we've had Steve Unger from Ofcom talk about superfast broadband, Philip Langsdale on real-time Heathrow, and last year, Nick McEwen on software-defined networks. So, this year, we have James Quinault to give our 50th lecture. James's biography is in your pack, and he's going to talk about a topic very much in the news, cybersecurity. He's currently the director of the Office of Cybersecurity and Information Assurance at the Cabinet Office. Beside previous roles in Treasury on environmental issues, green taxes, public expenditure planning and control, James has also worked in a number of other departments in Whitehall, including spells in the Economic and Domestic Secretariat in the Cabinet Office, as Private Secretary to the Head of the Civil Service, and on secondment to the Home Office, working on the overhaul of policy on criminal justice and immigration issues. So I'm very pleased to invite James to take the lectern and deliver the 50th IET Appleton Lecture.
Brilliant. Thank you, William, for that kind introduction. People aren't always so generous. I used to speak regularly at the military's Staff College and was once introduced there as follows. Many of you will have heard James speak before. Those of you who haven't will be looking forward to hearing him. For my part, I am honoured to be asked to address you, if rather embarrassed. As I look down the list of previous speakers, they were all clearly men of distinction in their field and genuine experts, and I'm afraid I am neither. I'm not even, to my shame, an engineer or a technologist. Still, though I'm not important, I think my topic is, so that will have to be my excuse. I'm going to talk about the increasing prevalence of cyber attacks, why they're a problem, and what the UK government is trying to do about them, together with its partners in industry and academia and internationally. Along the way, I will say a bit about why I think there's a crucial role here, particularly for engineers, in helping understand and tackle this phenomenon. I believe that how we secure the digital infrastructure on which we all now rely is one of the most pressing issues currently facing the world, and I hope to enlist more of you in helping find the answers. As we all know, the internet is transforming our society by driving economic growth, connecting people, and providing new ways to cooperate with one another. It's a cliché in giving speeches on cybersecurity to start with the upsides of cyberspace before moving on to the risks. But I'm not going to let that put me off. The internet deserves a bit of wonder. The World Wide Web only began in 1991, but today 3 billion people are online, 40% of the world's population. Billions more are set to join them in the next decade. There are already over 9 billion internet-connected devices. Trillions of dollars changed hands last year in online commerce. In the UK, internet trading accounts for over 8% of our GDP already, and that's forecast to rise to 12% next year. If the internet were a sector in its own right, it would be bigger than utilities. The internet's already having a profound impact on the way we live our lives. It's unlocking huge knowledge transfer, and it's providing new ways for people to build things together. Despite what this slide might imply, it's not all about Netflix, YouTube cat videos, and porn. That's what others is, by the way. This profound social change will only grow and gather pace as the number of users increases. Already, it looks like it will be on the scale of the very biggest shifts in human history. It's commonly compared to big shifts in communications, like the coming of the railways and so on. I personally think it's going to be bigger even than that, and that the only change that you can compare it with is the change that came from learning to smelt metals. In the context of that massive upside, banging on about the risks can seem rather perverse, a bit like smelling roses and assuming a funeral. But of course there is a dark side to this change, and it's not just securocrats that worry about it. The growing role of cyberspace has clearly opened up new threats as well as new opportunities. The digital architecture on which we all now rely was built to be efficient and interoperable. When the internet first started to grow, security was less of a consideration. However, as we put more of our lives online, this matters more and more. People want to be confident that the networks that support our national security, our economic prosperity, and our own private lives as individuals are safe and resilient. Unfortunately, a growing number of adversaries are looking to use cyberspace to steal, to compromise, or destroy critical data. We have no choice, it seems to me, to find ways to confront and overcome these threats if the UK is to flourish in an increasingly competitive and globalized world. What threats are we worried about? Well, the government is worried about cybercrime, which continues to increase in volume and sophistication. Much of this isn't new crime as such, it's old crime, which the web allows one to do at scale and remotely. I'm afraid, just as for legitimate businesses, the internet is reducing costs for fraudsters too. And they don't even need to be much good at it themselves. There's now a flourishing market in cyber exploits, allowing gangs to buy in skills from the experts when they need them. The government's also worried about espionage and theft using cyber means of intellectual property and trade secrets. The government believes that unless this is checked, it's a national security issue in its own right because of the potential to undermine incentives for innovation and growth. However, the government is also increasingly focused on destructive attacks, attacks designed not to steal or to defraud, but to compromise or destroy the digital infrastructure on which we all now rely. With the movement of more and more critical services online, with the development of the so-called Internet of Things, that dependence on digital infrastructure and therefore our vulnerability will only grow unless we confront this. How common are such attacks? Well, successful destructive attacks are thankfully still rare, but cyber attacks as a whole are very, very common. Fraud and IP theft using cyber means is going on in the UK on an industrial scale. And as you'll know, barely a day now goes by without news of some big and embarrassing new hack. These are the latest results of an annual survey of UK businesses on cyber. Last year, 8 out of 10 large firms in the UK said they'd been the subject of an attack, and they lost on average between £600,000 and £1.5 million each. And I fear that the era of destructive attacks is coming. Back in August 2012, someone attacked the administrative systems of Saudi Aramco, Saudi's national oil and gas producer. 32,000 computers were effectively burnt overnight. If you make oil, you can come back from that. In this case, there was no spill, actual production was not interrupted. But if you're a retail business or a bank, such a blow could be damaging indeed. How did these attacks actually work? Well, if the experts in the room will bear with me, I'll try and give a flavour for those of you who don't live this all the time. Some case studies were published by GCHQ 2 weeks ago as part of the government's drive to make the threat real for business and the public. And I've picked one of those. It's pretty typical in that though it's pretty ingenious, it could have been thwarted quite easily if the victims had been keeping up with the security best practice. There's a point there that I'll come back to about how we could all make things easier for ourselves and much harder for the attackers if we just did the basic things repeatedly. In this attack, the attackers discovered that a single web design company hosted a number of energy sector's businesses' websites. We don't know for sure how they compromised this company's networks. They may have masqueraded as a legitimate user with credentials that they tricked an employee into handing over using a spoofed email, or it might have been by exploiting an unpatched vulnerability on the company's web server. Anyway, the attackers compromised that web server and then added code which caused their own fake website to be loaded whenever the company's real website was visited. When energy firms then visited this fake website, it delivered malicious code to their computers. Their unpatched browsers were breached through known software flaws in Java and common internet browsers. This malicious code then started communicating with the attacker's own domains by sending beacons to show that it was active and to request commands from the attackers. This malware was designed to capture system information, user keystrokes, clipboard contents. The attackers could have used that information then to burrow deeper into their target systems until they found what they were after, be that trade secrets to steal or a crucial network to bring down. Luckily, in this case, security monitoring of network activity detected this beaconing, and the attack was broken before it could seriously affect the targeted businesses. But alas, that isn't always the case, and many attacks of this kind are successful. So to summarize all that, there are people out there in cyberspace who mean us harm, they have the means to attack us, and they're doing it now, at scale. And that's why the government takes cybersecurity very seriously indeed. It rates it as a Tier 1 threat to the security of the United Kingdom, alongside international terrorism or the threat of a major military confrontation. At a time when it was cutting almost everything else, the government found some new money for this priority and invested £860 million over 5 years in a national cybersecurity programme, which my office helps ministers run. The programme's objectives are listed here. I'm not really going to read them out, but just to note one thing, we're interested in tackling the risks, but we're also interested in opportunity from cybersecurity. These objectives are much about continuing to secure economic gain from cyberspace as well as tackling the risks. Government believes that if the UK can sustain a reputation for being good at this sort of security, then economic opportunity will flow from that, both in the direct sense of being able to sell cybersecurity products and services abroad, but also in an indirect sense, that it becomes another reason to headquarters yourself here, to bring IP-rich business to the UK, and so on. Cyber exports from the UK were worth £1 billion in 2013, up 22% from the year before. So that suggests that we're onto something here. Quantifying the impact on inward investment is harder, but we believe it will increasingly loom larger in companies' decision-making. To deliver the programme objectives, we've been working to the following lines of development. We are, in summary, trying to further deepen our national sovereign capability to detect and defeat the high-end threats. We're trying to ensure that law enforcement has the skills and capability it needs to get ahead of cybercrime. Government is working with the firms that own and manage our critical national infrastructure to make sure that they're properly protected. But we're also working more broadly to increase business awareness of the threat and make sure they're doing what they can to protect themselves. We're working to improve public awareness of the threat, so they're doing what they can to protect themselves, but also to drive up demand for better security in the products and services people consume. We are, of course, bolstering cybersecurity research and education, so we've got the skilled people and know-how we need to keep pace with this fast-moving threat into the medium term. And finally, of course, since this is a trans-border problem, if ever there was one, we are working internationally to try and bear down on what would otherwise be havens for cybercrime, to build up capacity in countries that are struggling with this, and to try and establish some norms of behaviour and self-restraint in what at the moment feels like quite an ungoverned space. I'll aim to step through each of these themes in turn, saying what we've done and what it is planned to do next. So first off, sovereign capability to detect and defeat the high-end threats. Well, a lot of this happens at GCHQ, where government has invested heavily to improve the basic visibility of the problem. For reasons you will understand, I can't say much about exactly what goes on inside this donut, but the understanding of the threat and where it's going that this investment has delivered underpins everything that we do. It informs government's guidance for business on what to watch out for, and it helps prioritise defensive efforts. The priority now here is to move beyond using this insight to provide general guidance and alerts to specific potential victims into protection at real time and at scale. In the coming year, GCHQ will be expanding a programme to share timely and usable intelligence on hostile cybercrime and state activity with security-cleared personnel and communication service providers, so that they can use this awareness to take early action on their networks and protect their customers. The second theme in my list was building up law enforcement's capability so that it's got what it needs to deal with the increasing volume and sophistication of cybercrime. And it is very sophisticated. Here's a website where you can just go online and buy yourself stolen credit card details. American cards, UK cards, whatever you want, it's all there. There's even a help desk if you get in a muddle. Similar sites also exist where you can buy cyber exploits, cyber attack packages themselves. Through the national programme, government has invested in more specialist prosecutors and policemen to get after this stuff. At a UK level, this effort has been brought together in the National Cybercrime Unit of the National Crime Agency, and this is supported at regional level by cyber integrees in 9 regional organised crime units. This new capability is delivering results, working with the FBI, GCHQ, and other international law enforcement partners, as well as private industry. The National Crime Agency has led for the UK on several major international operations on cybercrime. And backed by public messaging, these have been highly effective in reducing British firms' and citizens' exposure. There is a sense, though, in which these types of operations are dealing with the symptoms rather than the root cause. And the priority here for the next 12 months is to get after the criminal gangs that are driving this trade. Even where convictions are not possible, and often they're not because this is going on in jurisdictions out of our reach, operations can still be disrupted. The NCA is very active in pursuing this with law enforcement partners across the world, and we expect to see significant progress in the 12 months ahead. Watch this space. Next up is working with the companies that own and manage our critical national infrastructure to ensure that they're properly protected, and that's obviously absolutely crucial. The Government Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure is carrying on its great work with CNI providers to make sure they know what's out there and are fixing any vulnerabilities. The government is working with regulators to ensure they're picking this up as part of their general responsibility for security and resilience in the sectors they look after. Information sharing between firms, though, on threats and responses is the key. That enriches situational awareness and leaves everyone stronger. So to facilitate this, in March 2013, the government launched the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership, CISP, which provides a platform for companies to share cyber threat information in real time with one another and with government. A platform, by the way, built for us by an excellent British SME, Shorevine, whose boss I saw in the audience tonight. A fusion cell, composed of industry and government network defence analysts, examines the data and provides enriched information and advice to the CISP community. Over 800 organisations are now on there, sharing information with us and with each other in real time on threats. Prevention, supported by that kind of information, is obviously the first priority. But in the case of critical services, we also need to be ready to put things back on track and quickly if an incident does happen. So government's also established a National Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT UK, to be a focal point for national response to serious incidents. It's CERT UK's job to work with industry and the public sector to enhance our UK cyber resilience. CERT UK has already been blooded in action, providing information and advice on mitigation on the recently discovered Heartbleed and shell-shock vulnerabilities. CERT UK also successfully helped oversee the safety of the digital infrastructure that supported the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow last year and the Wales NATO Summit. The priority for them now is the programme of exercises which they are overseeing to support critical sectors in preparing for the potential impact of a destructive cyber attack. And the Prime Minister and President Obama agreed last week that there'd be a joint US-UK exercise in the summer to test the resilience of the City and Wall Street, with more such joint exercises to follow. CERT UK will oversee that for the UK. The next theme was broader business awareness. Obviously, the work with the critical national infrastructure providers is crucial, but we need to go beyond that into general business to raise their awareness of this threat, because this is a whole of the economy problem. Too much valuable UK intellectual property is getting stolen right now and using known techniques and tools against which protection exists. GCHQ's work suggests that 80% of the attacks that they see could be prevented if firms were just doing those basic things repeatedly. So a big focus of our work has been about getting that message out to business at large about what they can do to protect themselves, and at the company board level, not just in the IT department. We talk to big firms directly, of course, to make sure they get the message, but that doesn't scale beyond a certain point. So we're working with the audit houses, the Law Society, trade associations, the CBI, the Bank of England, the Financial Reporting Council, insurers, regulators, you name it, many others, to make sure that they're also beaming out this message on their channels. And I'm pleased to say there's some evidence that this outreach is working. With the big audit houses, we now conduct an annual survey of the FTSE 350 about their cyber readiness, and here are some of the results. 88% of company audit chairs now say that cyber is on their risk register, up from 58% last year. 58% of them say they've actively compared themselves against our 10 steps to cyber security guidance, compared with 40% the previous year. So we believe we're making some progress, at any rate, with big firms. But small firms are harder to reach. And even among larger businesses, the government judges that there is more to do before managing cyber risk is truly seen as integral to good business practice. To caricature, I'm afraid that many boards are still calling in the Chief Information Officer, finding him as incomprehensible as ever, agreeing a few easy wins, and then turning with relief to the business risk that they really understand. And I don't think that's good enough. I believe myself that until people feel that you can make money by being good at this, and that you will lose money by being bad at it before the point that you're utterly taken to the cleaners by some massive attack, they're not going to invest to the level that they should. So the aim of government action here has been to help strengthen the incentives for this by making it easier for firms who have made the effort to make that a differentiator for them in the marketplace, and by giving customers, investors, auditors, insurers better means to make judgments about how well firms are managing their risk. To support this, in June last year, the government launched Cyber Essentials, a major new scheme to incentivize widespread adoption of basic security controls that will help protect organizations against those commonest kinds of attacks that I mentioned. The scheme is constructed to be affordable and practical for all firms, small as well as large. And crucially, certification comes with a badge which firms can use to help demonstrate their security credentials to customers and investors, and which insurers and others can take into account when considering firms for relevant policies. Since the launch, over 200 companies have been awarded the badge, including high-profile organizations such as Barclays, Vodafone, the CBI, and many more are now going through the process. In fact, another set of blue-chip firms, including Standard Chartered, GlaxoSmithKline, and the National Grid, announced their intention to adopt it last week, and crucially, to drive it down their supply chains, which is how we think we will get to smaller firms. Possession of this Cyber Essentials badge is now mandatory for suppliers to government in certain categories of procurement. Government hopes that this too will drive adoption and contribute to increasing take-up during 2015. And I'm pleased to say that some big insurers are already saying that they will take Cyber Essentials into account when they consider clients for policies. Our hope is that this will sharpen the incentives to get stronger by making some hard cash ride on the decision to improve. Of course, for a standard to get traction in the marketplace, there's got to be demand for it. People have got to care enough about this to prioritize it when they make their purchasing decisions for services and products. So public awareness of this issue is also key if you want the market to take off. And of course, it's important in its own right, because if we all did those simple things to protect ourselves, this problem would be a lot smaller than it is. The government's key public awareness campaign is called Cyber Streetwise. It's about giving people that basic guidance they need on the simple things that you don't have to be Alan Turing to do, but which leaves you better protected, such as stronger passwords, checking the security certificate of online shopping sites. Others are about keeping software up to date and watching your privacy settings on social networks. Do you do all of those things routinely, or is life somehow too short? If you don't, I commend the Cyber Streetwise website to tell you why it's worth your while. Making progress on this is hard, not least because the last thing the government wants to do is to put people off from using the internet. The message, therefore, can't be too blood-curdling, but this campaign does seem to be moving the dial, albeit slowly. Since its launch, it's driven over 600,000 unique visitors to the Cyber Streetwise website, and the online films that come with this package have attracted over 5 million views. And our tracking suggests that the first phase of all of this has improved take-up of the key behaviours among 2 million adults. The priority here, quite simply, is to keep on banging on about this until we sense it's working. Meanwhile, government is working with internet service providers and with banks and with other intermediaries to broaden our reach and make sure they're carrying the message too. I think internet service providers in particular have a key role in protecting their customers and providing information to them when they do have a problem and where they can get help for it. So that's the public awareness theme. Then there's skills and research, because that underpins everything that we do. So there are now 11 recognised academic centres of excellence in the UK, which provides a framework within which government and business can talk to academia about cutting-edge research priorities on cybersecurity. Government has set up 3 research institutes into particular aspects where we know we need more work. These are the behavioural science of cybersecurity, automated programme analysis and verification, and industrial control systems. Great work is coming out of these institutes. To pluck out a couple of projects, there's a project using game theory to predict the costs and benefits of security interventions. The use of that for firms trying to decide how to spend scarce IT security budgets is obvious. Another project is on choice architectures, nudges if you like, ways of changing the default settings so that it make it easier for people to do the right things. This is using mathematical optimization techniques to measure what sort of interventions most work. It's being road tested now with small businesses. Another project coming out of the Automated Programme Institute has been about automatically proving the correctness, safety and security properties of JavaScript programs. This work has been done in partnership with Mozilla Foundation and Google California and is already delivering direct practical benefit. On the skills side, it's obviously crucial to be broadening the pipeline of talent coming into this field. To that end, government now has interventions in place at every level of the curriculum. In schools, the national programme has funded the development of cybersecurity learning and teaching materials at GCSE A level, with new age 11 to 14 materials to be released to school later this year. And the programme is also funding teacher training and development as well. For higher education, the government is working with academia and with industry to define a framework for the required learning outcomes in cybersecurity, in computing science and related courses. From next year, cybersecurity will be a mandatory subject of study in all undergraduate subjects accredited by the British Computer Society and by our host tonight, the Institution of Engineering and Technology. Government and industry in partnership are providing a mentoring scheme and cyber camps where existing cybersecurity professionals mentor students and recent graduates interested in a cyber career. The aim is to strengthen the soft skills of students and graduates from computing science and related disciplines and promote career opportunities in businesses and the wider cybersecurity profession. At postgraduate level, GCHQ has accredited 6 master's degrees, and the programme is also funding 2 centres of doctoral training as well to provide an expanded pool of top-end skills at the PhD level. The first cohort of students are now in their second year and should pass out in 2017. So this is all great, but we think we also need initiatives that look beyond the traditional formation routes and broaden the pool of available talent. GCHQ itself already uses an apprenticeship scheme, and that's been very successful for them. We're now piloting a broader joint cyber apprenticeship scheme for government and partners in industry. Funded by the national programme and industry sponsors, the Cybersecurity Challenge runs cybersecurity competitions with the aim of making this exciting and challenging and encouraging a broader set of people to test their skills and consider a career in the field. Nearly 19,000 people will have registered to take part in the competitions this year. The final, extremely testing final, is in March. The challenge also runs a schools programme for us to introduce young people in secondary education to cybersecurity. And since its inception in 2013, over 800 schools have registered to take part. 22,000 young people have used the learning resources. And as you would expect, we're using the internet itself to deliver resources and attract talent. A new massive open online course in cybersecurity, funded by government and run by the Open University, open for registration this year, and over 24,000 people enrolled for the first iteration. And there's even an app for it. To help teach young people about cybersecurity and encryption, students working on placement at GCHQ have developed a new free-to-download app called Cryptoy that is aimed at exciting interest in cipher and coding for a new generation of cyber specialists. So that's skills. My last line of development, my last theme, if you like, was about working internationally to bear down on havens for cybercrime, build capacity, and establish norms of behaviour in cyberspace. And the UK is leading the debate here. The government is investing in capacity building, supporting, for example, the development of cybersecurity strategies in key emerging economies, and training law enforcement officers to tackle cybercrime in countries that would otherwise pose a high threat to the UK. We're working with the Dutch on a mechanism for coordinating capacity building efforts across the world to be launched in April. Meanwhile, we're making progress on trans-border cybercrime. I think 53 countries have now signed the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, allowing proper collaboration between law enforcement authorities across borders on incidents. Of course, some of the countries we're most interested in collaborating with are not yet signatories to that instrument. And there is no point in disguising that there are some pretty fundamental differences in the world at a policy level about what we should do about governing behaviour in cyberspace and who should be involved in setting those rules. The fact is that there are 2 competing philosophies, 2 worldviews, if you like, struggling for the upper hand here. On the one hand, there are those countries who see the internet as a big source of risk to stable government and the world order. To control those risks, those countries believe that they need to have national sovereignty over their bit of the internet. They see the need for new international instruments to cement this, and crucially, they think the discussions on these new instruments are purely a matter for nation states, not industry or civil society, despite the stake that they have in the internet. On the other hand, there are those who, like the UK, take the opposite view. As I began by saying this evening, the UK, of course, sees cyberspace as an overwhelmingly positive thing. And as I hope you'll take away from this talk, there are risks, which the UK government takes very seriously and wants to see addressed, but it sees these as downsides on a massive upside, not reasons to wish the internet hadn't been invented. Rather than exerting greater government control, the UK is interested in keeping the internet, as far as possible, free of control. And as for national sovereignty in cyberspace, the UK government wants it undivided for the free flow of trade and ideas, not balkanised into a Chinese internet, a UK internet, and so on. As to what we do need to do internationally next, the UK's position is that humanitarian and other law already applies online, just as it does offline. The UK doesn't think that a binding new legal instrument is the right next step, except on cross-border action on crime, where we back the Budapest Convention that I mentioned. Rather than new treaties, the UK government thinks that norms, rules of the road, are the right way forward. And of course, the UK's list of norms would include the principle of protection online for individual privacy and freedom of expression. Finally, the UK government believes that discussion about the future governance of the internet must involve all actors. That includes civil society and business, not just governments. Frankly, this is far too important to be left to governments. The UK can't see how anything else makes sense when so much of the critical infrastructure is owned and managed by the private sector. So there's quite a fundamental debate here about how we see the world, with some pretty deep divisions. If the debate is so polarised, how will we make progress? Well, I think I can offer some grounds for optimism here, despite the divisions. Though countries disagree perhaps about the overarching legal framework on security, I think we can all agree on the need for practical confidence-building measures to build dialogue and reduce the risk of misunderstanding between countries. The OSCE adopted a first set of regional confidence-building measures for cyberspace in December 2013 and is already looking at developing further cooperative measures. Russia is part of that work. So room for practical progress there. CERT-to-CERT cooperation is taking off, including with countries that we don't always see eye to eye with on policy. And I believe we can also make progress at a practical level on cross-border law enforcement, even where states have not yet signed up to this Budapest Convention. The National Crime Agency has had offices in Russia and China. Both countries have expressed a willingness to work with us where they can at a practitioner level. Meanwhile, even on norms of behaviour, the debate is moving forward. Back in 2013, a UN group that included the US, the UK, China, Russia, several other countries, was able to agree a report including that international law is applicable in cyberspace. This provides valuable clarity and certainty in what could otherwise seem like quite an ungoverned space. Another group of government experts, and UN government experts, including these 4 countries, among others, is now at work collaboratively seeking to build on that report. One place where the grand strategic arguments will all play out will be in debates coming up on how the internet is governed and run, to the extent that anyone does run it. There are many countries who don't naturally take the authoritarian statist view, but who are concerned about the risks of cyberspace and now need to be persuaded that there are ways of tackling those risks that don't lose sight of what we're all trying to protect. That is, an internet open for the free flow of trade and ideas. Plans are underway for the US government to give up its stewardship role on key internet resources to the multi-stakeholder community. The UK government welcomes this move, not least because it will make it harder for people to assert that the US somehow controls the internet. But it won't be straightforward, and there will be significant challenges. We need to ensure that the security and development of the internet are safeguarded. This is a critical year for that. In December, the UN General Assembly will complete a 10-year review of the World Summit on the Information Society, with critical implications for the future of the internet. The UK will need to work closely with international partners and other stakeholders to advocate for a free, open, and unfragmented internet with a strong multi-stakeholder model of governance. So that, in brief, is the cybersecurity program that we and our partners in industry and academia are working to. I am quite sure that this work will never be finished. This is a dynamic problem. You can't build a wall here and stand back thinking that you've sorted it and are safe. But government does believe that if we can continue to make progress on the things I've outlined, that is, national sovereign capability to detect and defeat those high-end threats, increased law enforcement capability to get ahead of cybercrime, raised business and public awareness of the threat and what people can do to protect themselves, boosted skills and research in the field, and effective working with international partners, then we can raise the bar for the bad guys and make the UK safer in cyberspace. I'm about to conclude, but before I do, there's one more thing I want to say. As this is the IET, I want to finish, as I promised, with an appeal to the engineers amongst you. The Institute's been a key partner for us on this journey, and government is very grateful for the work it's done with us. We remain hungry for more, however. The truth is that engineering is front and centre of everything that I've talked about tonight. I've talked about how we need to stop people seeing this just as a technocratic issue. It's a national security threat. It's a class 1 business risk, which serious businesses should take seriously. It's a thing for the company board to worry about, not just the IT department. It's a crime. Nonetheless, technology is, of course, at the heart of it, and engineers must be at the heart of providing solutions against every one of the issues I mentioned, whether that's designing trusted systems for critical infrastructure, or dashboards for business that allow them to manage their risk efficiently, or building consumer products that make it easier for folk to do the right thing without having to think about it, or working internationally with us to find ways to encourage the responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities in open source software and then getting those fixed. Above all, though, I think it's on skills and training where we are looking to the IET and its counterparts to help. I mentioned the great work of the IET to build cybersecurity into software engineering degrees. That's fantastic. But of course, in a world where most devices will now be internet connected, not everyone designing them will be software engineers. I personally would like to see that now broadened out so that all engineering disciplines understand the importance of cybersecurity and have it built into their professional training. And we look forward to working with the Institute on that, or more generally, on encouraging more young people to get into this field. Together we can make a difference here and get ahead of this threat. Thanks for listening so patiently, and I look forward to your questions.
Fascinating stuff, James. Absolutely wonderful. It left me wondering whether you could pay for your next batch of stolen credit cards with the last of the previous stolen credit cards, and whether there was some sort of process going on there. We're now open to questions. There's a roving mic. When it arrives at you, can you please give your name and affiliation, and can you try and avoid giving your own mini lecture before you ask your question, please? And we'll also try and take some questions from Twitter and from the floor. So we'll take one here first, and we'll sort of bounce backwards and forth between the real and the virtual world.
Hi. Well, I think I'm in the real world, more or less. Lovely lecture. Thank you very much. You talked about the benefits at the beginning.
Do you want to say who you are?
I'm sorry. I'm Will Stewart. I'm from the IET, aren't I? I should say that, right? I have other jobs as well. You talked about the benefits and the risks. I wonder whether, to what extent there's something that crosses the boundary you didn't mention. To take an example, telephone-based payments, mobile phone-based payments is imminent and just arriving. Could actually be safer than the traditional credit card because you're working with a communicating device. And there may be other examples where cyber could actually be a safer way to do things than traditional. Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. I think there will be places where this makes things safer than the previous alternative. Throughout, I've tried to explain, is not that the government sees this as a major looming problem which must be tackled, that we're all going to hell in a handcart. Far from it. It sees these risks as the downside on a massive upside. We need to tackle them in a way that doesn't lose sight of that. Right, Dermot, do you want to give us a question from the virtual world?
This is just one from Twitter. What is your assessment of the number of new engineers we will need on this cybersecurity over the next 10 years? And that's from Dave Hartley. Thank you.
We've had a couple of studies done for us on this. They haven't come up with a headline figure in that sense. Part of the problem at the moment, I think, is that firms find it hard to specify what the skills are that they will need. This is such a fast-moving topic. But it's clear to me that we need to broaden the pipeline well beyond where it is at the moment. So the work that the government and its partners in the institutions and elsewhere have been doing to try and do that is absolutely vital. I concentrated on the kind of long-term pipeline, and that's great. We need to work on that, otherwise we'll never get out of this bind. But I think the short burn stuff is important as well. So I mentioned those PhD students. As I say, the first of them won't graduate until 2017. Apparently you have to study a bit before you get one of these things. Shame. That's a long time off, okay? So important for us, I think, are the shorter burn, faster burn things, MA courses, professional formation routes, things that encourage people already working in the IT industry and in engineering to get into this field. Another important point that I didn't touch on but could have done is that I think a goal here is to try and keep this open to the interplay of new ideas. I think personally, I think many of the solutions that will help us to get ahead of this problem lie in completely unrelated fields, in people who don't know that they may have the answer to these security problems. It can be hard sometimes for the government to be talking to those people. We don't know who they are, and they don't know they've got the answer. But we need to try and keep us permeable to that. In national security, that can be difficult. Sometimes the solutions that you're looking for are solutions to a vulnerability. For understandable reasons, that vulnerability is not something you want to put out in the open. And if people are smart enough to solve the problem, they're probably smart enough to work out why you're asking. So it can be difficult, but we need to keep working on it.
Very good. Okay, let's move to the centre. There's a question I can see about 3 or 4 rows back on the right-hand side, and I'll gradually move across and then move up and then move back down in a rather random fashion.
Thanks, Hilma Shaw, Coventry University. The UK government is using Experian to authenticate ID recently for the CAP farmers and also tax self-assessment trials. So what assurance have Experian given the UK government that they'll be able to secure all that personal ID that Experian are collecting?
So this is for the Verify programme for proving your identity in the consumption of government services. Experian are doing it at the moment, but I believe the idea is that they shouldn't be the only provider of such accreditation. Others will join the programme in due course. There has been extensive testing, as you would expect, of the cybersecurity of that programme and of Experian's contribution to it, and we're satisfied that they fit the bill.
Okay, do we have another one on Twitter? Or Dermot? Yeah, okay, so we'll take another virtual world question.
So another one from Twitter. Are security and privacy mutually exclusive, or should government strive to support both despite the risks? And that's from Tom Langford.
I think what ministers would say is that that's a false choice, that these things are not in conflict with one another in the way they're sometimes portrayed. That part of the point of security is to secure people's privacy.
Okay. Do we have one from this side? Yes, please.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tahir Siddiqui. Crime has moved from the high street to the cyber world. And so the question really is, to what degree has the government invested in changing the structure of our law enforcement agencies like the police and some of the other agencies so that they can be skilled and working on this? And also, what is the gap between the tsunami of crime coming along and the resources we have, and how much do they have to be scaled up to meet that?
So as I said, the government has changed structures in order to confront this threat. I referred to the National Cyber Crime Unit of the National Crime Agency, one of the 4 main commands in that agency. That didn't previously exist. It has brought together previous resources on this in a single place with a single purpose in order to confront that threat. So I think the government would say that it has invested in new structures. But of course, it's also important that this be mainstreamed in police forces themselves as well. If the NCA is tackling the top end of this, there remains all the rest of this threat to be confronted. So there's work going on to skill up mainstream police forces in cyber crime and in digital investigation as well. The programme that I help administer is funding work at the National College of Policing to train up new generations of policemen and women in that field. It's going to take a while, but we're working on it.
Thank you. Dermot, do we have another one?
Another one from Twitter. Do you see quantum computing as a threat to cryptography and or a way to improve the strength of ciphers? And that's from Samantha.
Well, I'm waiting to see. In the meantime, government programs other than mine are investing in quantum cryptography and exploring its scope and limits and implications.
Okay, we'll take one from the upper deck if there is one. I can hardly see up there, so if there is one, you have to wave quite vigorously. Okay, yep, there does appear to be one.
Hello. Okay, I think over here. My name is Sohail Talay-Mujir, independent consultant. Just up here, right straight ahead of you.
Sorry.
Right up
Cannot
here.
see you.
Okay. You're almost impossible to see. We can just
I was
about-
wondering, what does the government do with regards to cross-border cybersecurity, working with countries they consider hostile, such as Iran?
So I'm not aware of any cooperation with Iran on cybercrime. I did in my talk, though, say that even with countries which have not signed the Budapest Convention on cybercrime and who do not necessarily see eye to eye with the UK on grand policy in this area, it has nonetheless been possible to do some practical law enforcement cooperation at a practical level, and we're working hard to get more of that.
Okay, let's jump back to the virtual world. Dermot, what's your next one?
Twitter again. Where would we stand on an open internet given the PM's comments on encryption last week? And that's from Michael Summers.
So I'm not sure what PM comments on encryption are being referred to. The Prime Minister did not say the things that he was imputed to have said about being against encryption or wanting to ban it. On the contrary, the UK government supports encryption, invests in trying to find ways of making it stronger, understands completely that encryption is essential to online commerce, to privacy, and to everything else. Encourages, through the Cyber Streetwise campaign, people to think about using encryption for the protection of their precious data and finances. What the Prime Minister did say was that, as Prime Minister, he thinks it's important that there should not be areas of the internet which are simply off limits to the rule of law. That's a different thing.
Okay, let's come back to this side. I think I saw a hand just there. Is that right? Yeah, let's take that one.
Nigel Sedgwick from Cambridge Algorithmic Limited, which is a very small company which has been connected to the internet for a little over 23 years. I have intermittently had problems with organisations that run spam block lists, where they have blacklisted us, and I have never in all my time managed to get any item of evidence showing that we had in fact been hacked, but there is plenty of opportunity for these companies to waste an awful lot of my time. Is there anything either nationally or internationally to ensure that people who run spam block lists can actually provide audit trails for their information and a corrective mechanism which is fair?
That's a very interesting question, and I have to say not one that's ever been raised with me before. Many of the spam blocking houses are independent entities responsible not to governments or to that form of governance. It's an interesting question and one which I'd be interested to pursue with you.
Yes, it's sort of how do you police the people that apparently are the good guys? Yeah.
That can happen because of dynamic IP, because you've just taken the IP of someone who's been spamming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump back to Twitter again. Get Tanya down the stairs again.
Today at Davos, banking leaders said government aren't doing enough to protect banks, so they should have greater powers. Do you agree? And that's from Rose.
To take the question on its merits, the government does a great deal with the finance sector, and the finance sector does a great deal to help support the ecosystem of protection more generally. To be fair, banks and finance houses were among the first members of the Cyber Information Sharing Partnership I mentioned, and are strong contributors to that partnership. They put a lot of information on that. The partnership can tell some good war stories of how information that banks put on there helped pharmaceutical companies, for example, protect themselves against threats that they would otherwise have had to learn about the hard way. But we do a massive amount with the banks and with the finance sector. As I mentioned, the City and Wall Street will be the subject of this big joint exercise which the President and Prime Minister announced a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, let's go for centre section. I can see a number of hands. I'll take the one that's... Is there one with a microphone already? If not... All right, we'll take one over there, and then we'll come back to the centre
Hi, Hugh.
section after that, since the microphone's there.
Hugh Boys, the IET Cybersecurity Lead. Firstly, James, thank you for acknowledging the institution's robust support for your programme. As practicing engineers, what do you think is the highest priority thing we could do to support your programme in our daily working lives?
As I mentioned at the end, I think engineers are, front and centre of all of this, and I can think of things against every one of the themes that I set out, which are absolutely for you as a profession to do. But I think I would single out skills and professional formation as the thing where there is, there's a contribution to be made right now, both, kind of officially, but also in kind of modelling this in your working lives. Hugh, I know you personally are extremely active in this space, and we're incredibly grateful for that.
Okay, let's jump back to Twitter.
Twitter again. Are we doing enough in terms of legislation to enforce the security of safety critical systems operating in the public domain? And that's from Bob.
Okay. So generally speaking, the government does not think that this is an obvious place where regulation and legislation has purchase. Regulation is a blunt instrument at the best of times and looks particularly blunt in a field like this where everything is so incredibly fast-moving. That said, I think the one place where it might consider regulation, if it felt that standards were not being met, would be in the protection of the critical national infrastructure. Although I'm bound to say that at the moment, that is not the government's intent. It feels is getting all the cooperation it needs from critical national infrastructure providers to confront this problem and make sure that they're properly protected.
Okay, good. Right, we'll go to the centre section this time. So I saw a couple of questions sort of mid-section. Okay, we'll take the one that's about 5 rows back and about 5 people in, and then we'll move the microphone along further along that row after that.
Thank you. Martin Cassie from the Centre Limited. I understand fully the focus on sort of technology addressing cybersecurity. Do you think enough is being done to address the sort of human factors and human behaviours?
So thank you for that. Clearly, even in a bum-numbing 50 minutes, I can't cover everything that the programme is doing. What I should have said, perhaps, was that those 11 academic centres of excellence I mentioned, they were selected not just because of their technological or engineering supremacy, but because they're also places which are very good at seeing the behavioural science counterpart to that. The government understands absolutely that there's a human factors angle to all of this. I referred to some of the projects that the research institutes are doing, which are absolutely not just about technological solutions, but about finding ways of making it easier for real people and real businesses to take them up. So absolutely, and I hope that is factored into what we're doing.
Okay, do you want to send the microphone along to your right? Oh, it's there already. Good. Perfect. Go for it.
Andrew Budd from iProve, an SME in the authentication area. The discussion in the United States about the integrity of Huawei illustrated the way in which cybersecurity can have a direct impact upon international trade. What measures can the government envisage, on the one hand, to prevent the risk of autarky within this country, and on the other hand, to help us as exporters earn and gain greater confidence when exporting to other countries?
So the government is utterly committed to helping British cybersecurity businesses, large and small, grow and prosper and export in this field. When the Prime Minister went to the US just a few days ago, he took with him a dozen UK SMEs working in cybersecurity and was very glad to do so. And that's something that I'm sure we'll repeat. So you have the government's assurance that they're right behind you as you seek to export. Turning to your broader point about the possible impact on trade of people using security and risks as a possible cover for protection, I think there is a danger there, and it's one the government will be watchful for as it participates in trade talks and in discussions about this at a European level.
Okay, let's get one of the microphones brought down to the Twitter, but whilst it's over there, we'll take that one that's up there.
Thank you. John Fuller, retired. The hackers take down commercial and government computers. What is the ability and legal position and ethics of the government taking down the hackers' computers? And obviously we've got the example what happened in Iran a year or so back.
It is most activity here is governed by the Computer Misuse Act. It would be an offence for a commercial organisation to hack back under UK law. The government does have some exemptions to that for its own activities. Yes.
I think we understand that answer. Dermot, what have you got on Twitter?
Network weaknesses. How do we educate developers to automatically force the prevention of Stack Overflow? And that's the last question I've got. How do we educate developers to automatically force the prevention of Stack Overflow? And that's from Peter Wong.
That sounds very specific.
Yes, I'm not going to answer that question specifically. I hope the answers I gave earlier about what we need to do to raise standards of professional development and build cybersecurity into the professional formation and training of engineers generally can help answer that point.
Okay, I'm going to take one more. Is there one? Yes, there's one up at the top. I haven't been back there for a bit, so let's take one last one from the
Peter Sabrin from BT. Great to hear that you're taking your message to so many people and amongst us as well. Are you taking your message to the bad guys? Hackers conferences, for example.
Are you invited to give keynotes?
So, no, I have not been invited to give a lecture at a Black Hat. It would be fun to go sometime, but yeah. The government's doing its best to beam its message out on this to anyone who will listen, and I hope that also includes people who might be motivated to do harm. Part of the point of all of this is to try and raise the cost of doing business for the adversaries here. If they're hearing a message that it's going to get increasingly difficult to get away with this sort of thing without being disrupted and convicted, well, good.
So I'm going to ask one last question, because I'm staggered nobody else did, which is the sort of obvious one. Was it North Korea that did it? Or more specifically, can we be fairly sure that we can identify the source of attacks, or is it really difficult to do?
So I undertook to take questions, but I didn't undertake to answer them. Yeah. Attribution in cyberspace is very difficult, yes.
Yeah. I think that is an excellent note to stop quizzing James, and to invite Professor Jim Norton to give a vote of thanks for tonight's lecture.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that I hope you'd agree with me that James Quinalt has coped admirably and with a very welcome degree of humour, James, with a major challenge this evening. Now, cybersecurity is a subject which, rightly in my view, generates great passions, whether that's about privacy versus law enforcement, or about the quality of software engineering versus time to market. James also rightly stressed the upsides here. We shouldn't get lost in the quagmires of doubt, but it's important to understand them and to deal with them. Rather like me, I fear, I understand James is distinguished by his interest in watching sport rather than playing it. However, he has a great passion for cricket, and I hope that you will agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that within the constraints that are inevitable for a senior civil servant, James has played a very straight bat this evening, particularly in response to your questions. I think recognising that there are areas where it's actually very difficult for a serving civil servant to go. I wouldn't have liked James to return to the Cabinet Office be greeted by a P45. we actually need his calm skill coordinating events at the heart of government here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you please to all join with me as I propose, in the institution's traditional words, that the best thanks of the Institution of Engineering and Technology be accorded to Mr. James Quinault for the delivery of the 50th Appleton Lecture. Thank you. And I think our President has a little award to make.
Yes, so before you sit down, James, a little memento for tonight. It's not a quantum key. It is, in fact, a pair of cufflinks with the location of this building engraved into the cufflinks. So hopefully that will be a good memento for tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So a few minor things to close. First of all, you'll be getting an email from us asking for feedback from this event. Please do give us feedback. It's really helpful to make sure that we get the structure of these right to fit your requirements. And that email will also contain a link to the IET.tv footage, so you can watch the lecture again and look at those answers yet again if you want to. Those of you who requested a certificate of attendance, it will be at the reception desk in the entrance hall on your way out tonight. We now have time for some drinks and nibbles and some networking back where coffee was served earlier. I do hope as many of you as possible will join us and have a chance to chat informally to James and to others. If you're heading home, a safe journey. So I formally declare the 50th Appleton Lecture